For the first time, the Chinese regime's senior medical advisor admits Wuhan officials lied about the initial virus outbreak. Wuhan's mass testing initiative is raising concern. A viral video shows samples thrown together without first being labeled. Same state visits by Chinese leaders, different treatment for human rights protesters. This time, we look at Switzerland's case of how friendship with the communist regime can be a fine line to walk. China is promoting a type of virus treatment and sending the remedy to countries as international aid. The remedy has caused adverse fatal reactions in the past. We spoke with a victim's family to find out more. And over 100 nations back a probe into the World Health Organization and the origin of the CCP virus. But it may be difficult to carry out because of the Chinese regime's early actions in Wuhan. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Chinese authorities have admitted for the first time that local authorities in Wuhan lied about the outbreak. Dr. Zhong Nanshan, the CCP's senior medical advisor, confirmed in an interview with CNN on Saturday that Wuhan authorities had, quote, suppressed key details about the magnitude of the initial outbreak. Dr. Zhong didn't mention if the central government in Beijing also lied. But internal documents obtained by NTD show that all levels of the Chinese regime were involved in hiding the truth from the public and still are. The central government ordered provinces to conduct secret training and adopt prevention and control programs as early as January 15th, 5 days before they admitted human-to-human transmission. It was actually Dr. Zhong who admitted human-to-human transmission on January 20th. 7 days earlier, Taiwanese experts confirmed to their own government that the virus was contagious after visiting a Wuhan hospital. A March 2nd report from state media Xinhua shows Dr. Zhong's ties to the Chinese Communist Party. The report says he, as a party member of 50 years, was chosen to read the oath at a Chinese Communist Party initiation ceremony for new members. The oath read, support the party's program, abide by the party's rules, keep the party secret, fight for communism for one's whole life, be ready to sacrifice everything for the party and the people, and never betray the party. May 18th is the 7th day of the CCP's mass testing initiative in Wuhan. 11 million people are supposed to be tested within 10 days, more than 1 million per day. Last week, residents told us that medical staff didn't change their disposable gloves between patients, raising concerns about cross-infection. Now, a video has gone viral showing swabs taken from around 20 people are all put together in one small bottle, and the specimens aren't even labeled with people's names. Many complain that it's senseless to line up for hours for this so-called test. One netizen said this kind of madness is quite common under the CCP's rule. They say even the U.S. is incapable of testing 11 million people in 10 days, let alone China. Even though the decision is irrational and irresponsible since the central government made it, the Chinese people are forced to follow along. Adding that Chinese test kits only have a 30% accuracy rate, like many countries have complained about after receiving them, so they'd be better off flipping a coin. Last week, a hospital in a northeastern Chinese city was closed due to the outbreak. No patients are being admitted. Now, a hospital in another northeastern city is also refusing all patients except outpatients. But everyone must be tested before entering. There was a confirmed case officially reported at this hospital on May 15th. There's growing support for Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's calls for an independent investigation into the virus. Australia's foreign minister told reporters on Monday the amount of support behind the virus probe is very encouraging. Australian politician George Christensen launched a survey for the virus probe, calling for a stand for sovereignty against the threats of China. After Australia called for an international inquiry into the virus origins, trade tensions have escalated between Canberra and Beijing. China, accusing Australia of playing petty tricks, recently suspended beef imports from 4 of Australia's largest meat processors and is considering imposing hefty tariffs on imports of barley. In an interview on Sunday, Australia's Trade Minister Simon Birmingham said he had asked for talks with his Chinese counterpart.
Now, that request has not been met, with the call being accommodated at this stage.
He said Australia was open to having that discussion, but also has the right to bring a case against China at the World Trade Organization if Beijing imposes tariffs on Australian barley. Relations have been strained between Canberra and Beijing amid Australian accusations of Chinese meddling in domestic affairs and concern about what Australia sees as China's growing influence in the Pacific region. Australia insists that its call for a coronavirus inquiry was not politically targeted at Beijing. On May 15th, the EU rallied behind Australia's proposal. Head of the EU's foreign policy, Josep Borrell, expressed support in an op-ed, saying, quote, "To strengthen our defenses against future pandemics, we also need a thorough, independent scientific inquiry into the origins of the crisis." Currently, Australia has reported 0 new virus cases for the past 2 weeks. Chinese authorities are promoting unproven virus remedies and sending them to other countries as aid. But they come from a part of China's drug industry that's grossly underregulated. Remedies like these have already caused severe adverse effects in the past.
Since the outbreak, Chinese authorities have been promoting traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM injections, as an effective treatment for COVID-19.
Our experience is that Chinese medicine injections should be used boldly and from early stages.
China claims the remedy is a combination of Chinese and Western medicine. Communist leader Xi Jinping has personally stressed the importance of this combination. The treatment involves injecting herbal compounds into the patient's veins. It's highly controversial and has caused major health incidents in the past. But China now is sending these remedies as international aid to over a dozen countries, including Italy, France, and Iran. Yan Zhihua, a retired history teacher from China, witnessed the danger of the injections for himself. His wife, Tan Xiuming, died within 6 months of receiving TCM injections. Her treatment took 12 days. Tan had been treated for cancer at Fuling Central Hospital in Chongqing City. She started vomiting constantly, couldn't eat or drink, and her consciousness became clouded.
We didn't realize something was wrong until she had almost died. Then we quickly stopped her injections. But in the following 6 months, because of the drug poisoning, her entire body's system was damaged. Her brain was also damaged. She was eventually paralyzed and died.
Yan and her daughter tried to ask for answers from the hospital, but were faced with resistance. They were eventually thrown out by security. The father and daughter tried to report this to the Chinese authorities, but they refused to take their complaints or to investigate. For centuries, the Chinese have used oral herbal medicine to treat and cure diseases. But injecting herbal solutions into people's blood veins is a modern practice. It was invented by Communist Party military doctors in the 1940s. The practice is neither recognized by Chinese medicine tradition nor by Western medical science. China's latest official data says in 2018, TCM injections caused over 110,000 adverse reactions, ranging from vomiting to spasm and fatalities. Some Chinese scientists have been sounding the alarm. China's renowned biologist Rao Yi had criticized the injections as pseudoscience and killing for profit. But why are Chinese medicine injections, a billion-dollar industry, so lacking in regulations? The answer might lie in the profit margin. Just take a look at this one drug manufacturer as an example. Shandong Buchang, a pharmaceutical giant aiming to become China's Johnson & Johnson, has a star product called Danhong injections. In 2018, the company sold over 95 million Danhong injections and reported a gross profit of over 80%. The Chinese company came under the spotlight last year when its chairman was found to have paid $6.5 million to get his daughter into Stanford University. Despite its history of severe adverse effects, Danhong injections are still sold in China today. The chairman is a representative of China's National People's Congress, China's top organ of state power. There are over 100 types of TCM injections on the market, produced by over 200 manufacturers. generating over $10 billion in sales. Corruption is rampant in the industry, and it reaches as high as top officials at China's National Drug Overseeing Agency. The former head of China's Food and Drug Administration was found in 2017 to have taken over $100,000 in bribes to approve a TCM injection that has caused death in patients. Chinese authorities restricted certain injections from being used with children and pregnant women, but many more unproven remedies are still promoted by officials. After facing resistance from Chinese authorities to investigate, Yan Zhihua and his daughter came to New York over a year ago to seek help from the World Health Organization. The father and daughter wrote down their experience, hired people to translate it into English, and mailed the dozen-page-long complaint to the WHO in November 2018. They waited half a year without response. Yan started calling WHO's New York and Geneva office.
Out of the 10 calls we made, over 9 were not answered. One day, I was finally able to connect with their Swiss headquarters. The person listened while I talked for a long time. And in the end, he refuted me with one sentence, saying that my case is just a single case. I argued back, saying it's not a personal story. It's a public failure. He didn't even ask me why it's a public failure and hung up.
Yan said when she walked past the UN headquarters in New York, she had complex feelings. Yan's father believes the UN has an obligation to investigate.
You are looking at a government of 1.3 billion people. They are sacrificing lives for profit. This is such a serious and widespread public health incident that probably doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And as the United Nations World Health Organization, I have filed the complaints and I have offered all the evidence for you. And yet you don't say a word about it and ignore it.
He said his helpless feelings is now repeating around the world in the WHO's handling of the CCP virus.
It seems to me that the WHO's lack of action is quite consistent.
Some government officials around the world have criticized the WHO for being too slow to sound the alarm about the virus due to China's pressure. President Trump has halted U.S. funding for the WHO for potentially mismanaging and cover up the virus crisis. This week, the WHO is holding its annual assembly. Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping was invited to speak. Yan said all her direct families have moved out of China in an effort to escape retaliation from Chinese authorities, but one of her distant cousins was still found by China's police.
He didn't even know what happened. They dragged him to the security bureau and threatened him.
The Yans say they won't stop appealing until their case is heard. The daughter said she has met many patients in the hospital who suffered similarly from the injections.
These are all victims of the black medical industry. These patients, some have already died. Some are paralyzed. They suffered so much and they can no longer speak out, so they can only rely on us, those of us who are families of the victims and who are still alive, to stand up and speak out for them.
Chinese state media Beijing News reported that one major manufacturer of TCM injections is now introducing virus treatment to countries including the United States, UK, Canada, and Australia.
In the middle of the CCP virus pandemic, countries around the world are reviewing their relationships with China. This time, we take a look at Switzerland. This rich alpine country has always been close to China. After the communist regime seized control in mainland China, Switzerland is one of the first Western nations to recognize its rule. It cut ties with Taiwan 3 days later. Maintaining a friendship with the communist regime can be a fine line to walk. However, in 1999, a diplomatic incident showed just how fragile the relationship can be. Switzerland has one of the largest Tibetan communities in Europe. In 1999, when then Chinese leader Jiang Zemin visited the Swiss parliament, protesters nearby held up Free Tibet banners and booed Jiang. Swiss police protected the Chinese delegation but did not silence the demonstrators. Jiang was shocked at the sight of protesters and furious with his hosts. In his speech, Jiang told Swiss lawmakers Switzerland has lost a friend. Media reported that Swiss President Ruth Dreyfus tried several times to calm down Jiang, but the situation grew tense again at the state dinner. When Dreyfus brought up the issue of human rights in China, Jiang got angry and almost left the table. Today, China is Switzerland's third largest trading partner. It's also one of the most important markets for Swiss companies. Switzerland is the first continental European country to include a free trade agreement with China. In 2017, Chinese leader Xi Jinping arrived for a state visit. Unlike the 1999 visit, Tibetan protesters were barred from protesting in front of the parliament, where the Chinese delegation would be able to see them. The protesters were given a 2-hour limit. Police arrested over 30 demonstrators as they shouted, "Free Tibet" and "Don't deal with killers."
Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Free Tibet!
Protesters complained that the Swiss government was favoring a totalitarian regime over its own citizens.
And as Swiss citizens, we are really concerned how our government, our own government, treats us, does not permit us to demonstrate, and does trade with such a dictatorship as China.
The president of the Tibetan community in Switzerland later said that Swiss officials asked them to withdraw their application for a permit. Journalists asked officials if Switzerland had kowtowed to China, particularly with respect to human rights. The minister replied, "We can't get everything done right away. You have to win trust over a number of years. You have to speak clearly, and this is what we did, but you have to admit that we can't expect overnight success." Switzerland has recorded over 30,000 infections and more than 1,800 deaths from the CCP virus. Over 100 nations support a push to investigate the World Health Organization and the origin of the CCP virus. The probe would take a look at the WHO's response to the outbreak. The proposal comes just ahead of the World Health Assembly's annual meeting that starts today. Australia and the European Union are leading the charge.
A coalition of over 100 nations is calling for an independent probe into the World Health Organization and the origin of the CCP virus. U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar said the WHO failed to obtain the information the world needed, costing many lives.
We saw that WHO failed at its core mission of information sharing and transparency when member states do not act in good faith. This cannot ever happen again.
The probe calls for a closer look at the WHO's contribution to UN efforts and its actions and timelines pertaining to the pandemic. NTD's China analyst Tang Jingyuan says it's nearly impossible to investigate the origin of the virus because the Chinese regime has destroyed the evidence.
First of all, the Wuhan South China seafood market is a very important place that is believed to be the source of the virus. But the original scene, a lot of original data already has been destroyed.
In February, the People's Liberation Army's top expert in biological warfare, a Major General Chen Wei, was dispatched to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Tang said it indicates the lab has a military background.
According to the CCP's usual practice, it will not surprise me at all when they want to conceal some information related to the source of the virus, to fabricate or forge something.
The leader of China's Communist Party, Xi Jinping, pledged $2 billion over the next 2 years to developing countries to aid their virus response. Yet Tang says it's the CCP's way of bribing countries that may be involved in the investigation.
Xi Jinping now gives a huge sum of money to the international community, especially the developing countries, African countries. He gives them kind of subsidies. This is actually a disguised bribe.
What's more, Tang says the WHO has already violated the principle of being politically neutral by refusing to let Taiwan into the organization. Therefore, he says the organization has lost its authority and credibility.
Hong Kong's legislature plunged into chaotic scuffles for a second time this month today. The dispute is over a bill that would criminalize those who are deemed to be disrespecting the Chinese national anthem by sitting down or turning their back.
Pro-democracy legislators charged at security guards surrounding a pro-Beijing lawmaker who had taken the chairman's seat in the meeting. It's the second time in 10 days that legislators have pushed and shoved each other over the procedures of electing a chairperson.
The reality in Hong Kong today is that whenever Beijing, whenever Carrie Lam and the pro-establishment don't like something, they will do whatever it takes, including breaking the system that we have, the rules that we have.
The House committee has built up a backlog after failing to elect a chairperson since last year. The backlog includes the China national anthem bill. Hong Kong politician Nathan Law said in the public hearing that the China national anthem bill does not protect the people of Hong Kong.
Such a law is not to protect people's freedom, but the brutal regime that constantly exploits its own people. The so-called protecting the symbol of the nation is actually to protect the self-esteem of the Chinese communist regime.
Last May, scuffles broke out in the legislature over a proposed extradition bill. If passed, it could have seen people stand trial in courts in mainland China. The bill sparked months of pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong and was later scrapped. The China national anthem bill is expected to be given a second reading on May 27th, despite the procedural chaos. Protesters have been calling on social media for citywide demonstrations on that day.
And today, the State Department demanded that the CCP disclose the whereabouts of the Dalai Lama's successor. 25 years ago, the then 6-year-old Panchen Lama was kidnapped by the Chinese regime. The Panchen Lama is an important figure in Tibetan Buddhism, and he was selected by the Dalai Lama. After the boy was kidnapped, the CCP appointed its own to the position. To recognize the years that have passed since the boy's disappearance, the State Department is calling today for his whereabouts in the name of religious freedom. The essence of President Trump's economic recovery plan is Buy American, deregulate, and innovate. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said yesterday he'll use powers like the Defense Production Act to bring manufacturing home and reduce reliance on China. Pharmaceuticals and medical supplies are top of the list.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro spoke on Sunday about President Trump's plans to bring back America's economy. Coordinator of the Defense Production Act, or DPA, he said the aim is to buy American, deregulate, and innovate. Speaking to NBC's Meet the Press and ABC's This Week, Navarro said the president's administration plans to bring key supply chains back to the U.S. The CCP virus pandemic has raised concerns about U.S. dependence on China for pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. Navarro said the plan would resolve this issue, using things like the DPA and other private sector enterprises to bring these supply chains home. He said it would also bring the benefit of creating manufacturing jobs for American workers who have been laid off due to the crisis. Speaking about the economy, Navarro said, this president built up the most beautiful economy in 3.5 years, and the Chinese Communist Party crippled that in 30 days. He said that the Buy American agenda will also help protect national security.
Most U.S. states reported a drop in new CCP virus cases this past week. Only 13 states saw a rise in infections. Nearly all of them have started to lessen restrictions.
The number of CCP virus cases in the United States rose to about 1.5 million on Monday, while total deaths approached 90,000. Most U.S. states reported a drop in new cases. Only 13 states saw a rise in infections compared to the previous week. Tennessee had the biggest weekly increase in cases with a 33% rise, followed by Louisiana with 25% and Texas with 22%. But on the national scale, new virus cases are down 8% in the last week, helped by continued declines in New York and New Jersey. Nearly all 50 U.S. states have allowed some businesses to reopen and residents to move more freely. Kansas and Missouri saw the biggest decline in new cases, after an outbreak at a St. Joseph, Missouri meatpacking plant resulted in over 400 cases in the first week of May. St. Joseph sits on the Kansas-Missouri border, just north of Kansas City. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that states wait for their daily numbers of new cases to fall for 14 days before easing social distancing restrictions. 13 states meet that criteria so far, down from 14 states a week earlier. Georgia, one of the first states to reopen, saw new cases fall 12% in the past week, and now reports 2 consecutive weeks of declining cases.
New York City may start reopening in the near future if the city meets all state indicators. Western New York will start to reopen tomorrow, making it the 6th region in the state to do so.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said on Monday he thinks that the city could start to reopen in the first half of June. In order for this to happen, 7 indicators have to be met. As of now, the city only meets 3 of those 7. New York City beaches will open up soon, but the city is getting fences ready which can block the access point to the beaches. The fences will be set up if people don't follow the rules. Beaches will only be open for people to take walks. Swimming will be prohibited as there won't be any lifeguards. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo said he has encouraged professional sports teams to plan reopenings. Games would have to be played without fans, but could be televised. Western New York, which is where the Niagara Falls are located, will be the 6th region in the state to reopen starting Tuesday.
In Europe, France and Germany say they'll ask the EU to create a recovery fund worth over $500 billion. And the UK expands its testing for the virus to include kids who have symptoms.
France and Germany agreed on Monday to propose creating a recovery fund worth over $500 billion. The fund would offer grants to European member states and regions hit hardest by the virus crisis. The EU may give a green light soon for sales of the drug remdesivir as a treatment against the virus. The drug is made by U.S. pharmaceutical company Gilead. Britain expanded its testing strategy to allow anyone over 5 years old with virus symptoms to book a test. The government also recruited 21,000 people to work on a tracing system. They want to find people who've had contact with those who tested positive. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro joined his supporters in protests against lockdown rules. Brazil's public health officials think that quarantines and social distancing are still needed, but Bolsonaro wants to get the economy going again.
Athletes around the world are finding it much more difficult to train due to current lockdown restrictions. But in the UK, one rock climber is still striving to reach new heights.
Despite Britain being under lockdown, 21-year-old Imogen Horrocks is continuing to hone her climbing skills in the back garden of her parents' house. The Team GB athlete trains with the help of a climbing wall. This, coupled with the fact that she can be outside, is what's keeping her mind at ease amidst the pandemic.
I can't imagine what it's like to be in an apartment all day and not even have my board. I think I would go actually insane.
But even though she is still able to train, Horrocks says she misses her friends in the climbing community. She misses competing even more.
Especially at the World Cups and European Cups. I really miss that. And just getting on the wall and doing the movement-based stuff because you can't do everything on the board, unfortunately.
Horrocks is glad that sport climbing is in the Olympics now. It will make things easier for her and other rock climbers.
I think it'll be mega for climbing. We'll get so much more funding, we'll be able to do things and actually have more support. Because for athletes, you can't really, unless you're number one, it's really difficult to get any funding or any help. You still have to do other stuff on the side, which kind of takes away from the training.
Sport climbing will make its debut in the Tokyo Games, which are now scheduled to happen in the summer of 2021.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates and see you tomorrow.